The dawn broke over the Montana territory not with a whisper, but with a bruised purple silence. It was late October 1878, and the air tasted of iron and coming snow. The wind sweeping down from the Bitterroot Range didn't just blow. It hunted, seeking out every gap in the canvas, every seam in a coat, every crack in a resolve that was already fracturing. Elara Vance gripped the reins of the buckboard wagon until her knuckles turned the color of old parchment. Her hands, once accustomed to the delicate keys of a piano in a Philadelphia parlor, were now chapped, raw, and stained with the grime of 1,000 miles. Beside her, her 17-year-old brother, Toby, slept the sleep of the exhaustion that only the young and the desperate know. His sandy hair was matted against his forehead, his face gaunt, losing the softness of boyhood too quickly. The wagon lurched violently as the left rear wheel, the one that had been wobbling since the Dakota Badlands, found a deep rut. "Easy, Bessie," Elara murmured, her voice raspy. The mare, a sturdy bay with ribs showing like the staves of a barrel, lowered her head and trudged on. She was a creature of duty, much like her mistress. Elara's green eyes scanned the horizon. She was 26, a widow of 7 months. Her husband, William, had not died a hero's death on a battlefield, but a slow, agonizing death from consumption in a damp city apartment, coughing up dreams of the West he would never see. He had made her promise to take Toby and go. Go where the air is clean, Elara. Go where the land is free. Free land. The irony tasted like ash. The land was free, perhaps, but the toll to reach it was paid in blood and spirit. Are we close?" Toby mumbled, stirring as the wagon groaned. "Soon," Elara said, the lie slipping out with practiced ease. "The map says Black Creek is just past this ridge." They crested the rise, and there it was. Black Creek wasn't a town so much as a scar on the valley floor, a huddle of timber buildings clinging to the earth as if afraid the wind would scour them away. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, gray ribbons against a steel sky. As they rolled down the incline, the settlement revealed its rough nature. A blacksmith's forge glowed like a demon's eye. A saloon named the Golden Nugget spilled the noise of midday revelry into the street, and a general store with the sign Abernathy's Provisions leaned precariously to the left. Elara pulled Bessie to a halt in front of the store. Every muscle in her body screamed as she climbed down. She reached up to help Toby, whose leg, still weak from a bout of fever in Nebraska, wobbled as he hit the dirt. "Look sharp, Toby," she whispered, straightening her dusty skirts. "We are Vances. We do not look like beggars." "Well, look what the wind blew in," a voice rasped. Elara turned. A woman stood on the porch of the store, wiping her hands on a stained apron. She was shaped like a barrel, with a face that looked like it had been carved from dried apple, but her eyes were kind. "We're looking for the land office," Elara said, her voice steady. "We have a claim for the unsettled parcels near the foothills." The woman, Mrs. Abernathy, stopped wiping her hands. Her expression shifted from curiosity to a heavy, weary pity. "You've been talking to that land agent in Helena, haven't you, Mr. Sterling?" "Yes," Elara nodded. "He assured us." "He assures everyone," Mrs. Abernathy interrupted, glancing nervously down the street toward the saloon. "I'm Maud Abernathy, and if I were you, dear, I'd turn that wagon around and head back to civilization while you still have a horse to pull it." Elara felt a cold stone settle in her stomach. "Why? Is the land gone?" "The land is there," Maud said, lowering her voice. "But Barrett Hatcher thinks it's his. He's the cattle baron here, runs the Double Bar Ranch. He doesn't take kindly to sodbusters fencing off his grazing range. Scared off 3 families this summer alone." Before Elara could respond, the saloon doors banged open. The sound was like a gunshot in the thin air. 3 men stepped out, bringing the smell of stale beer and violence with them. The man in the center was dressed in a fine black coat that looked out of place among the rough-spun wool of the townsfolk. He was handsome in a serpentine way, with slicked-back dark hair and eyes that were flat and dead, like a shark's. This was Barrett Hatcher. "Fresh meat in Black Creek," Hatcher drawled, stepping off the boardwalk. His boots crunched in the frozen mud. He circled the wagon slowly, running a gloved hand along the wood. "A widow and a boy. Sterling is scraping the bottom of the barrel." "We have a deed," Elara said, stepping between Hatcher and Toby. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird, but she kept her chin high. "Signed and stamped," Hatcher laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Paper burns, Mrs. Vance, Elara Vance. Mrs. Vance, in this territory paper doesn't hold power. Iron does, lead does." He stepped closer, invading her space. "This is my valley. I charge a toll for breathing my air. And looking at you, perhaps we can work out a trade instead of cash." Toby lunged forward, his face flushed. "You leave her alone." Hatcher didn't even look at the boy. He simply backhanded him. The blow was casual, dismissive, but it sent Toby sprawling into the dust. "Toby!" Elara screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. She looked up at Hatcher, fury overriding her fear. "You are a monster." "I am a businessman," Hatcher sneered. He signaled to his men, two brutes who looked more animal than human. "Overturn their wagon. Teach them the lesson regarding trespassing." "I wouldn't do that, Barrett." The voice came from the shadows of the blacksmith shop. It was a voice like grinding stones, deep and resonant. A figure stepped into the light. He was immense, easily 6'4", with shoulders that spanned the width of a door frame. He wore a duster coat made of buffalo hide and a hat pulled low. A thick dark beard obscured most of his face, but it couldn't hide the jagged scar that ran from his temple to his jawline, pulling his left eye slightly downward. He held a Winchester repeater in one hand, the barrel resting casually against his shoulder. Hatcher stiffened. "Silas Blackwood, I thought you were hibernating in that cave of yours." "Came for supplies," Silas rumbled. He walked into the middle of the street. The crowd that had gathered parted like the Red Sea. "You know the code, Hatcher. You don't strike women. You don't strike children." "They're trespassing," Hatcher spat. "They're on a public street. Touch that wagon, and I'll drop you where you stand." The threat wasn't shouted. It was stated as a simple fact, like the coming of winter. Hatcher's hand twitched toward the pearl-handled revolver at his hip. Silas didn't move, but his blue eyes, cold as a glacial lake, locked onto Hatcher's. For a long, suffocating moment, the only sound was the wind whistling through the eaves. Hatcher broke first. He took a step back, forcing a sneer. "You can't play shepherd forever, Blackwood. Eventually you have to sleep." He turned to Elara, tipping his hat mockingly. "Welcome to Black Creek, Mrs. Vance. Watch your back." Hatcher and his men retreated into the saloon. Elara let out a breath she felt she had been holding for minutes. She helped Toby up. His lip was split, bleeding. She turned to the giant. "Thank you, sir. You saved us." Silas Blackwood didn't smile. He looked at her, then at the wagon, then back to her. His gaze was intense, unsettling. "Go back to Philadelphia, lady, or wherever you came from. This land will eat you alive, and Hatcher will pick your bones." "We have nowhere else to go," Elara said, her voice trembling but defiant. "We bought the old Miller place. We're staying." Silas stopped turning away. He looked back over his shoulder. "The Miller place? Up on Granite Ridge?" "Yes. The roof leaks, the well is dry, and it's 5 miles from the nearest help." He paused. "Which is me." "Then we shall be neighbors," Elara said. Silas grunted. Not for long. He walked away, his heavy boots fading into the noise of the town. The old Miller place was exactly as Silas had described, perhaps worse. The cabin leaned drunkenly against the wind, the logs gray and rotting in places. The barn was little more than a lean-to, but to Elara, it was a castle. It was theirs. For 3 weeks they worked until their hands blistered and bled. They patched the roof with sod and tar. They cleared the debris from the well until muddy water finally flowed. They didn't see Silas Blackwood, though sometimes, at night, Elara felt eyes watching them from the tree line, a silent sentinel. Then came the blizzard of November 78. It didn't start with snow. It started with a drop in temperature so severe the sap froze in the trees, creating loud, cracking sounds like rifle fire. Then the sky fell. For 2 days, the wind screamed like a banshee. Snow piled 6 feet high against the cabin walls. Inside, the fire struggled against the drafts. They burned their spare furniture, then the floorboards of the loft. On the 3rd morning, disaster struck. Toby, delirious with cold and hunger, tried to chop firewood from a frozen log they had dragged inside. The axe slipped. His scream pierced the howling wind. Elara rushed to him. The gash in his shin was deep, pulsing with dark blood. She bound it tight, but the blood soaked through. Within hours, the fever returned, raging hotter than the fire. "Elara," Toby whispered, his teeth chattering. "I see William. He's waving." "No," Elara sobbed, piling every blanket they owned onto him. "You stay here, Toby. You stay with me." She knew she couldn't save him alone. She needed help. She needed the giant. She put on William's old coat, wrapped a scarf around her face until only her eyes showed, and grabbed the rusted Navy Colt revolver she kept in the flour bin. "I'll be back," she promised the unconscious boy. Stepping outside was like stepping into a void. The world was white, directionless. The wind knocked her down immediately. She crawled, stood, fell again. She had no idea where the road was. She only knew Silas's ranch lay to the west. She walked for what felt like hours. Her eyelashes froze together. Her fingers lost all feeling. She began to feel warm, a deadly sign of hypothermia. She wanted to lie down in the soft white blanket. Just for a moment, she thought. Just a nap. She sank into the snow. The darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. Then, a shape blocked the wind, a shadow darker than the storm. Massive hands grabbed her, shaking her. "Wake up!" The voice was a growl. "Damn it, woman! Wake up!" She was lifted effortlessly into the air. The smell of wet wool and tobacco filled her nose. Then, nothing. She woke to the sensation of fire, not burning, but thawing. Pain, sharp and stinging in her fingers and toes. She was lying on a bare rug in front of a massive stone hearth. The cabin was sturdy, the logs thick and chinked with fresh mortar. Silas Blackwood sat in a chair nearby, whittling a piece of wood. "Toby," she croaked. She tried to sit up, but her head swam. "My brother, he's hurt. The axe." Silas stood up. "He's in the back room. I fetched him after I brought you in. Stitched him up. He's sleeping." Elara collapsed back onto the rug, tears of relief leaking from her eyes. You found us." "I heard shots," Silas said. "Or I thought I did. Went to check. Found you half buried in a drift a mile from your door. You have a death wish, Mrs. Vance?" "I have a dying brother, Mr. Blackwood." Silas stared at her, the firelight dancing in his eyes. For the first time, she saw the man beneath the scars. He wasn't just angry. He was haunted. "Call me Silas," he muttered. For 4 days, the storm raged. They were trapped together. Elara learned about Silas. He had been a major in the Union Army. He had led a charge at Cold Harbor that sent 300 men to their deaths. He had survived when they hadn't. The scar on his face was from a saber. The scars on his soul were from the letters he had to write to mothers and widows. He had come west to forget, to be alone where no one looked at him with expectation. "I am not a hero, Elara," he said one night, staring into the flames, a mug of whiskey in his hand. "I am just a man who is good at killing, and out here, that's the only skill that keeps you breathing." "You saved us," Elara said softly, reaching out to touch his scarred hand. He flinched, but didn't pull away. "That is not killing, that is life." "Hatcher will come for you," Silas warned. "When the snow melts, he wants the water rights on your land. He won't stop." "Then teach us," Elara said, her eyes blazing. "Don't tell us to leave. Teach us how to stay." The thaw brought mud, and it brought a new rhythm to life on Granite Ridge. Silas didn't just help them fix the cabin. He turned it into a fortress. He reinforced the door with oak beams. He cut firing ports into the shutters. But the real work was on Elara and Toby. Every morning at dawn, Silas marched them to the tree line. "The pistol is a tool," Silas barked, watching Elara fumble with the heavy Colt. "It is not a magic wand. You don't wave it, you aim it." He stood behind her, adjusting her stance. His large hands were surprisingly gentle on her shoulders. "Breathe out," he whispered near her ear. "Squeeze between heartbeats." Bang, the bottle on the fence post shattered. "Good," Silas said, a rare smile tugging at his beard. Toby, hobbling on a cane, learned to shoot a rifle. He learned to track. He learned that silence was louder than noise in the woods. As the weeks turned to months, the bond between Elara and Silas deepened. It wasn't a spoken romance. It was in the shared coffees at dawn, the way Silas watched the perimeter while she gardened, the way Elara mended his torn shirts. "You're a stubborn woman," Silas told her one evening, as they watched the sunset paint the Rockies in gold. "And you are a difficult man," she replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. He turned to her, his gaze searching. "Elara, I am not a man for soft things. I am hard edges and bad memories. I don't need soft," she whispered, cupping his scarred cheek. "I need real." He kissed her then. It was a kiss of desperation and hunger, a claiming of souls that had been lonely for too long. But peace is a fragile thing in the territory. In April, the ultimatum arrived, a rock thrown through the window with a note tied to it. "Get out or burn." 3 days. He's done playing," Silas said, reading the note. "He'll bring his whole crew, 10, maybe 12 men." "We stand," Toby said, checking the load on his Winchester. "We stand," Elara agreed. On the third night, the moon was hidden, behind clouds. The valley was pitch black. They waited. Elara inside the cabin with the Colt, Toby in the loft with the rifle, Silas outside, a ghost in the darkness. The first sign was the smell of kerosene. Then, a torch flared in the night. "Burn them out, boys!" Hatcher's voice rang out. Gunfire erupted. Toby fired from the loft, dropping a man who was running toward the porch with a torch. Elara fired through the ports, the kick of the Colt bruising her hand, but she didn't stop. Outside, Silas was a whirlwind. He moved from cover to cover, his repeater flashing. He wasn't fighting. He was conducting a symphony of violence. He drew their fire, shouted taunts, led them away from the cabin. But there were too many. "Flank them!" Hatcher screamed. "Get to the back!" 2 men kicked in the back door. Elara spun around, firing blindly. One man went down, clutching his leg. The other, a brute named Pike, lunged at her. He knocked the gun from her hand and pinned her against the table, his hands around her throat. Elara clawed at his face, her vision spotting. Suddenly the door was filled with a massive shape. Silas. He didn't shoot. He dropped his rifle, grabbed Pike by the back of his coat, and actually threw him, through the open window. Silas turned to Elara, chest heaving, blood streaming from a graze on his forehead. "Are you hurt?" "No," she gasped. "Stay down." The gunfire outside had stopped. Silence fell, heavy and thick. "Hatcher!" Silas roared, stepping onto the porch. "It's over! Your men are down or running! Face me!" Hatcher emerged from behind the barn, holding a lantern in one hand and a pistol in the other. He looked disheveled, his arrogance shaken but not broken. "You're a nuisance, Blackwood," Hatcher spat. "I should have killed you years ago. You can try now." Hatcher raised his gun. Click. He had miscounted. Silas raised his own weapon, but he didn't fire. He lowered the barrel. "I'm not a murderer, Hatcher, unlike you." Sirens, no, not sirens. Whistles, horses. From the road, a posse rode in, dust kicking up in the moonlight. Leading them was a man with a tin star on his chest, Marshal Jeremiah Stone. "Drop it, Hatcher," the marshal bellowed. Hatcher looked at the marshal, looked at Silas, and threw his gun into the dirt with a curse. "You're under arrest, Barrett Hatcher," Marshal Stone said, dismounting. "For arson, attempted murder, and racketeering. Judge Sterling has been building a file on you for months. We just needed to catch you in the act." The marshal walked up to Silas. "You held the line, Major." "We held it," Silas said, pulling Elara to his side. Together. The trial of Barrett Hatcher was the talk of the territory. He was sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. His grip on the valley was broken, but for Elara and Silas, the real work was just beginning. Summer brought wildflowers to Granite Ridge. It also brought a wedding. It was a simple affair in the small church in Black Creek. Toby stood as the best man, standing tall and proud without his cane. Maud Abernathy cried loudly in the front pew. When Elara said, "I do," she looked at Silas and saw not the broken soldier, but the builder, the protector. "I pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said. The celebration was held at the newly expanded Double Bar Ranch, now bought by Silas and renamed the Phoenix Ranch. The entire town came. There was fiddling, dancing, and tables groaning under the weight of food. As the sun set, Silas found Elara on the porch, looking out over the valley. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. "More than I thought possible," she smiled. She turned in his arms, her expression serious but joyful. "Silas, I have news." He stiffened slightly. "Bad news?" "No," she laughed softly, taking his large hand and placing it on her stomach. "We're going to need to add another room to the cabin. By winter." Silas froze. His blue eyes went wide. He looked at her stomach, then at her face. The man who had faced cavalry charges and blizzards without blinking looked terrified and awestruck. "A baby?" he whispered. "Our baby?" "Yes." Tears, actual tears, welled in his eyes. He buried his face in her neck, holding her as if she were made of spun glass. "I will keep you safe," he vowed. "I will keep both of you safe until my last breath." "I know," Elara whispered. The seasons turned. The valley flourished. The Phoenix Ranch became a beacon of what the West could be. Not a place of lawlessness, but a community. Toby grew into a fine young man, eventually becoming the sheriff of Black Creek, known for his fairness and his lightning-fast draw. And Silas and Elara, they grew old together. Their hair turned the color of the winter snow, but their love remained as constant as the mountains. One evening, years later, sitting on that same porch, watching their grandchildren play in the tall grass, Silas took Elara's hand. "You saved me, you know," he said, his voice raspy with age. "I was a ghost until you showed up in that wagon." "We saved each other," Elara corrected him. "We built a life out of the ashes." The sun dipped below the bitter roots, casting a long, golden light over the land they had claimed, defended, and loved. It was a harsh land, yes, but it was home. And that, my friends, is the legend of the Phoenix Ranch, a story of how love can bloom even in the frozen heart of winter. If this story moved you, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps us bring more tales of the frontier to you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Dust and Legends channel. We release new original Western audio dramas every single week. I want to hear from you. Do you think Silas was right to spare Hatcher, or should he have ended it there? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, keep your powder dry and your eyes on the horizon.